Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here. As Sean said, I'm a researcher and a sort of activist as well in this space. I have spent about 20 years by now around issues of AI and how it impacts the broader ecosystem that we live in. For the past 7-8 years in particular, it has been more about human-AI relationships. And one sort of intuition that I had when I sort of started thinking about it, and which has become the conclusion that I still have, is basically that the biggest challenge that we have got isn't actually technical in this space, it's relational. It's about how we are dealing with these developments ourselves. So this is what I would like to talk about today. The specific problem that I'm trying to look at is basically how do we govern the evolving nature of human-AI relationships as we go. So probably starting with an uncomfortable question, just also to move a little bit. Can I just, okay, I'll not do that. So we have got two images here. The one on the left is generated by AI, and on the right is generated by a human artist. So if you think about which one took more skills to take, the AI probably generated the first one in about 30 seconds. The second one, human artist, probably took hours, but he or she probably enjoyed every brush stroke. The AI user, maybe not that much. So this is the type of space that we are in, and here's the thing, basically, if you were to choose one of these for your next project, which one would you go for? Let's also think about it in an alternative way. If this was about planning or designing for an emergency route, emergency evacuation route, or some sort of medical interface, medical device, then which approach would serve the humanity better? So there, I think we come across this problem of why we have to sort of understand, why we have to get used to partnering with machines, with AI intelligence, and try to learn really how to live with this emerging reality. So there are lots of problems, but before going into the problems, let's just pause for a moment and appreciate what we have seen. AI discovered pretty interesting strategies in a 3,000-year-old game called Go that human players has never found in history. We have AlphaFold just a couple of years ago cracked protein structure prediction, a 50-year-old scientific challenge that had limited our drug discovery and biological research. And AI translation has already accomplished what humanity never could in millennia. Well, sort of. It's not optimal yet, but almost like through real-time communication across almost all languages, it's developing. But we are seeing basically a Mandarin speaker and an Arabic speaker being able to converse. The depth of that conversation is again improving, I could say. But if we have made that much progress with the technology itself, then you would normally expect our governance to be a bit more sophisticated as well. But instead, this is what we got in 2020 when an algorithm was involved in the process to make decisions about students' life, the students' future, at A-level and GCSE level. It was a spectacular failure of governance, really, if you think about it. And it wasn't even AI that we are talking about right now. It was a much simpler, just statistical model that they used. But it's a really nice demonstration of how our governance track record, essentially, with these sort of systems. So if it was like that with a simple algorithm, then how are we going to deal with the adapting, self-learning, autonomous, increasingly agent-like systems? And from 2022, that's a little example, well, big example, to now we are talking the Nobel laureates, Turing Award leaders, the thinkers of our time are now all sort of united against warning us against the managing against the AI risk, like extreme AI risks. And at some stage, actually in 2023, they called for a pause on all of the AI, major AI experiments. It didn't happen because we couldn't give up the advantages, I guess, as humanity altogether, but still we are currently, that's the urgent problem that we are all thinking. But if we all agree that that's the problem, then how come we are struggling so much? To me, my personal take is that there is a fundamental paradox in here, because AI's technical success essentially means governance's failure. And why do I say this? Because AI field as a whole has been optimizing for increasing autonomy, increasing human-like performance, thinking machines, basically systems that are designed for independence, learning, and adaptation. Whereas governance requires completely the opposite. We want humans full control over systems that we develop. We want accountability to be very clear, and we want systems that can be basically audited and shut down if needed. And it's not just a hypothetical problem, probably as you see, but we actually have a big experiment that's currently going on. So here maybe I can just check. Can I just see hands of those who have used ChatGPT in the past week, month? Excellent. So we are all basically together part of the largest, biggest AI experiment in history that's not governed, essentially. 1 billion weekly users making billions of decisions with AI assistants, and we are using it for everything from homework to business strategy to medical advice, and there is no centralized oversight on how we are delegating authority to these systems. So I've got some pictures of a TikTok video that has been going around. That just shows how, just to demonstrate how people feel about it. So given this, again, a quick check. Who in the audience basically think that AI is more like a collaborator, an agent? Have anyone? Excellent, okay. You. And how many think that it's just a tool? Okay, that's majority, but still we have both camps. And it changes actually, the demographic changes as you go different audiences about this issue. So we have got two camps. The tool camp says that AI is a massive, sophisticated calculator. Yes, it processes huge amounts of data. It looks intelligent, appears intelligent, but at the end of the day, it's mathematical operations at scale. But the other camp, basically the camp that says it's increasingly agentic, and there's something actually very different going on here, just say that, well, these systems are not just computing. There is a learning adaptation capabilities emerging. They are increasingly self-coordinating, self-goal setting, and they're increasingly basically creative as well. So it's looking more like agency in this space. So another version of the same problem, it's an older philosophical dilemma. Basically, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and acts independently like a duck, then does it matter if it is just sophisticated computation? Because agency is defined by functional behavior. The tool perspective, on the other hand, says it's just because it quacks like a duck doesn't make it a duck. It could be a very sophisticated duck call, and AI basically can simulate agency perfectly while lacking everything that makes it that makes agency useful, meaningful. Well, to me, again, the issue is basically they're both right, essentially. If you think about the ChatGPT case, there are things that you could say that it's becoming more like an agent, and there are things that you can say, well, again, it's just pattern recognition, pattern matching in this case. I think the functionality, for functionality, it doesn't really matter much on how you are labeling it, but it does matter quite a lot when it comes to the governance of these systems. So if you think about just entertaining the idea that it's an agent-agent relationship between human and AI, then what we are essentially talking about scenarios where both agents can be held responsible, both agents can monitor each other and negotiate about future steps, and both have rights. essentially, and can participate in governance processes. Whereas if you say that it's a strict agent-tool relationship, then we have unilateral accountability as humans. We bear responsibility. We monitor the tool. Tool cannot monitor us. And basically, tool also cannot be meaningfully participate in our governance decisions because it doesn't have any rights. So we have this paradox, and the way that I think we need to really spend a little bit time is this between the dichotomy, basically, between tool versus agent, to find new ways of thinking about it and new ways of describing potentially what we are dealing with. Well, I just added this picture here. It comes from describing LLMs, large language models, as stochastic parrots by Dr. Emily Bender and colleagues. That's a powerful one. I'm not necessarily advocating that that's the right one, but I think it's the right direction that we are basically, we should be looking into, describing it in other ways, basically. So, given, I mean, if you think about, if you entertain about the human versus AI agency relationship, then again, I won't read the whole table. You will have access to my slides after my talk, so I have included some of these slides basically for completeness, not necessarily going through all in detail here. But again, the gist is basically human has consciousness. AI agent can only mimic that consciousness. We have got rights, duties, etc., and we have all the systems that we have in place to manage basically the human side of the issues, but the AI agent side, that's the type of agency that we see there is quite new and unprecedented. But it's not just comparing basically humans and AIs and the types of agencies. We also have to recognize what AI genuinely excels and what humans, us as humans, lack. Basically, well, scale and speed, being in position to basically operate 24/7 without fatigue breaks, processing huge amounts of data, processing huge amounts of parameters simultaneously, having perfect memory, being consistent, being in position to able same standards, exact same standards over time, and detect correlations that are really hard to find within complex spaces. But again, we each also have quite different vulnerabilities. Well, on the human side, we know that we are biased in our own way. We have got, we tend to overweight our own emotions and thinking, intuitions. And we can only juggle a few concepts at once. Whereas on the AI side, we are seeing entirely new types of cognitive vulnerabilities, like hallucinations, generating confident but completely false information, or seeing things that actually doesn't exist. And again, being really confident about when talking about these sort of things. And there are some peculiar intelligence gaps that we observe as well. For example, in ChatGPT, you could use it, and depending on what you prompt, it could write a brilliant analysis of Shakespeare, but can't reliably count the word "the" in a paragraph. It can create really creative solutions, but cannot follow explicit formatting rules. It can connect distant concepts, but could really miss obvious information. And depending on, again, how you ask, it has inconsistent access to its own knowledge. Information can be there or not there. I actually have a very good example of this one, but it would take a little bit more time. So basically, what I'm trying to say is you can't predict where AI will be brilliant or where it will be surprisingly incompetent. And it's documented now that AI doesn't make human mistakes. It makes uniquely AI mistakes that require entirely new oversight mechanisms. And when it comes to the governance enforcement mechanisms, again, we have in agent-agent, human-human relationships, we have got courts, contracts, social pressure, reputation, 1,000+ years of experience of managing these sort of relationships. When it is human versus AI agent, well, the enforcement mechanisms become shutdown, reprogramming, constraint, and human override. So this is, again, something completely new to us. And if you look at different scenarios of governance when AI gets involved, when we try humans governing AI, essentially we end up with an accountability capability paradox. This is similar to what I was saying earlier with the governance paradox. Essentially, the more able, the more sophisticated AI systems becomes, the harder, the more difficult it becomes for us to manage them. So you can think of it as a sort of senior bank executive trying to justify the decisions, loan decisions for thousands of people at once. They can basically, they don't have essentially authority to explain how each of those decisions has taken place, but they do have responsibility. They are accountable for it. When we come to AI governing AI scenario, then we end up with something that we could call recursion trap, essentially. That is, if you think about an AI system A, if you want to audit that or govern that with an AI system B, then we need another AI system C to control AI system B, and so on. So and when we add layers of governance with new systems, that adds more complexity, and without necessarily explaining, without giving us any explanation power. And that basically, that becomes an endless loop. Where we do see this in practice, it's probably the high frequency trading that we currently see. It's very algorithmic processes. Algorithms can reject decisions, accept decisions in milliseconds, that there is no, and basically they negotiate terms with the other algorithmic systems in this scenario. And the third element, AI governing humans, produces a democratic deficit. So if it is AI involved in school exam results and people's placements at universities, the loan decisions, or who goes to jail, or the politically, like how are you going to vote in the next elections, then there's a problem there that we all sort of say, but we do not have the mechanisms to appeal when the problem is like this. So when AI gets involved, basically as a subject, object, or as a peer, our existing governance processes just collapse, and we need to find new creative ways to deal with this issue. And there's the item that we call the non-deligible core. So it's the functions, basically, functions that must remain under human authority, not because AI cannot deliver it, or not because humans necessarily deliver it better, but because democratic legitimacy requires humans to retain them. It's the situations like privacy versus security, for example, or how are we going to the ethics of prioritization in a medical trial, in any type of triage scenarios, etc. So where does all these take us to? So I think it really takes us to a hybrid model of human AI governance, essentially, where we recognize that it's not AI versus human, or AI taking jobs or replacing humans, but it has to be, the solution has to come from a recognition of this cognitive, joint cognitive ecosystem in some way. So let's get back to the ChatGPT. The current governance gaps that we are observing is no oversight of billions of consequential human-AI interactions, no standards when delegation is appropriate, no accountability when the AI advice causes harm, and essentially there's a huge democratic deficit there, a private company shaping public opinion, public knowledge in many domains. The infrastructure, well, that's I think the biggest design challenge, probably. That's where I wanted to say the word design, basically. I'm coming from a computer science background, but this is really, my mind, is the ultimate design challenge of our field, essentially. So the infrastructure that I think could help potentially get us progress, make us progress a little bit more, has at least 3 components. The first element is what we call Hague continuum. That is a spectrum of basically starting from human dominant, human has a final say, all the way to AI dominant scenarios. The relational dimensions, so thinking about what matters most in terms of the relations between human users and machine and AI, and then the trust threshold, so where we have to make sure that we are more careful and where our governance needs to adopt. And with this sort of thinking comes institutional requirements for institutional innovations. Well, we have to, again, recognize that it has to be a continuous governance. That would be ongoing monitoring, feedback, and policy adaptation in response to all the evolving capabilities. And perhaps we are talking about entirely new institutional forms, hybrid institutional forms, like AI audit courts, hybrid oversight bodies, and algorithmic juries, each overseeing a different element in the space. When it comes to the first element, the Hague Continuum, the idea is basically because AI development follows a trajectory toward more and more autonomy, driven by the field's core ambitions, our governance must evolve to manage this tension as well and not simply accommodate it. So to simplify, it looks something like this. We have human dominant at one end, AI dominant is the other end, and everything in between is requiring different governance requirements. This is, I've put the historical progression of AI just to sort of exemplify how this would work. And we'll just go through that quickly with you. The early phase, so when the first AI systems, the rule-based AI systems were in place, which are actually some of the successful applications are still in use, the scenario is that basically human determines all the rules and AI executes precisely defined tasks, like in the case of tax calculation or form processing systems. The next phase, when we started talking about advanced machine learning, that's when AI systems are not explicitly following the rules that were set by the human reasoning, following human reasoning, but instead directly starting to learn from data. But even in that case, it was humans were setting parameters and reviewing outputs. AI handles pattern recognition. We have lots of examples that has been in use, like ranging from fraud detection to risk assessment systems that we are still using again. But they're still reliable to a large degree, essentially. But when it comes to the foundation model, the current systems like ChatGPT or like other decision support systems, what we have is AI starts to generate content and recommendations, and human provides some sort of oversight and starting to basically human treating AI almost like a peer. And the cognitive load of the human individual person or human institutions gets much less when we talk about complex systems, when we have multiple AI systems in practice, like in the case of a city infrastructure, if you think about or other autonomous service networks. So, well, for each phase, we have got a number of sort of ways to track the behavior of the system, ranging from all the way from asking for process transparency to really trying to make sure that the systems are aligned with human values. So with the ChatGPT examples, what we have witnessed when it was introduced in 2022, it was an AI writing assistant. Well, we said that humans were in control. The current phase in 2025, we do see around that many users treat it almost already as an authoritative source for a number of tasks. And the emerging phase, perhaps more concerning as well, integration into workflows where AI recommendations essentially become the decisions that are in place. The second element of the human AI governance infrastructure is this relational dimensions. So that's meant to be AI's most important characteristics that are increasingly relational, temporal, and contextual rather than intrinsic. There, basically, so now I have collapsed my continuum to be a bit shorter as a reference. The first dimension that I would like to mention is the decision authority distribution. So ranging from all the way humans making all decisions to AI making all decisions. And in between, we have different scenarios of shared decision making. So we do already, I mean, we can put the current systems in place, like medical diagnosis more towards the human dominant end, although they use quite a bit of pattern recognition earlier, but ultimately, basically, the decisions are made by doctors. The content curation more towards the latter half, and automated trading examples could probably go to the complex systems phase. And each time, each transition from a phase to the other creates new governance requirements that we want our systems to adapt in a coordinated way. The second element, the second dimension that I'm going to include here is the process autonomy. It's about basically how the decisions get made, the process that leads to the decisions, whether AI follows rigid human described processes or whether it self-designs its own processes. Again, it's an evolutionary process in between. There's a long spectrum there. And the third element is the accountability configuration. It's again whether it's full human accountability, clear human accountability versus diffused accountability that's shared between different stakeholders, different system components in the process. So with ChatGPT, it would be like, well, decision of authority has shifted from AI suggests to AI decides what I should know do. In terms of the autonomy of the process, well, it has shifted from AI follows my prompts to AI shapes how I work, how I'm thinking. And in terms of the accountability, well, you could always want for the person using it to be responsible, but it's increasingly diffused responsibility between user, AI company, and the society in the other components in the system, essentially. And measuring is a huge challenge. How are we going to measure position across these dimensions? I've got a couple of ideas here on just to basically, as a starter, to think along these lines. But maybe for the sake of time, I'll leave it in the slides for, for those interested to have a look later. But the third element, this is a pretty sort of important one, as for the others. Democratic legitimacy requires us knowing when to trust an AI system or multiple AI systems and when not to. We need some sort of pivots, basically, governance pivots, where we, and they need to be quite dynamic to match the type of dynamicity that AI relationships has, but not too much dynamic, again, to overfit in the process as well. So what we are essentially saying that we need, our governance processes has to be adaptable enough for us to avoid basically blind trust or blanket distrust across different implementations. Because the trust levels that you would have for a rule-based system, even though the application stays the same, it will change. The trust requirements will change if it is if you start using a foundational model for the same application instance. So in this case, just to demonstrate again the level of complexity with the governance issues that we are dealing with, we again have the human AI governance continuum, and on the vertical side we have the trust complexity. It's definitely nonlinear. We wouldn't know the exact shape of that nonlinearity, but I have used some sort of exponential function to describe it. But the more important point is basically when it's rule-based systems, what the governance requires essentially, the governance could be achieved by verifying all outputs. And when you start moving over to advanced machine learning systems, you can't do that anymore, and it has to be statistical verification from that point onwards. And somewhere along the mid-range of the advanced machine learning systems, we start to not also verify all of the outputs or use statistical verification, but we start to use trusting on some validated outcomes, not well, that's basically more uncertainty by this point. We are already introducing it into our system. And when we move on to the foundation models, it's increasingly, well, systems move on from providing information or recommendations to exercise direct authority. So our governance, basically, parameters becomes should evolve to accommodate that. And from foundation models to the complex systems, this time it's transition from trusting individual AI systems to trusting networks of interacting systems. And these thresholds doesn't necessarily need to be just these four, the ones that I mentioned. This is only for demonstration, and we can, as our understanding improves, and depending on the application context, the context in question, you could adapt these thresholds to the specific needs. And in ChatGPT, again, just getting back to that one, from verification to delegation, transition happens basically when users stop fact-checking AI outputs. Information to authority threshold essentially is passed when students start submitting AI-written essays, professionals use AI analysis without review. And individual to collective threshold is when we have multiple systems like tutors, AI therapists, AI advisors, starting to shape our societal knowledge in new directions. Well, again, some suggestions on how Hague solutions, the institutional solutions, could work in this situation. AI audit courts, for example, could evaluate whether ChatGPT's influence on education and journalism is legitimate. Hybrid oversight bodies could monitor AI advice in sensitive domains in real time, and the thresholds provide clear guidelines on when to delegate versus verify, etc. So the infrastructure that I'm describing is sort of supposed to work alongside with the categorical thinking that we currently have, but it really, the use of this infrastructure is really to help us identify where we are on the spectrum and how relationships are shifting. The real challenge ahead is really working along this and building governance that works at AI speed while accounting for human democratic legitimacy needs. Just for takeaway points, trust in AI is really no longer optional because it's already embedded in our lives and we are already trusting it quite a bit. But what we need is basically AI that we can justifiably trust, so demonstrably trustable systems that we need to create and oversee. Oversight mechanisms must be dynamic and proportionate to the level of sophistication for the system in place, ensuring that the systems are trustworthy while maximizing the potential of the system itself. The solution is most likely to come from recognition of collaborative human and AI cognitive ecosystems, and investment in interpretability research has to be really to AI systems designed for governance rather than just for performance. Just a few related papers that we have got with QR codes, so if you are interested to read more. And yes, thank you. So my presentation slides are available online if anyone wants to have a look, and another QR code for my profile, link to profile. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zeynep. Okay, questions, please, for Zeynep. One right here. Kat is on it. That's cool.
Oh, hi.
Thank you. That was fascinating. So where does the governance come from? If there are two main sort of centers of technology kind of dominance, if you like, in the US and China, is it going to have to be, and technology is so global, is it going to have to be some kind of global governance body setting the standards here? Where does it come from? Where does it sit, that governance model?
Well, I would say it's pretty scalable, basically. Whoever is serious about the governance issues, then I mean, the thinking could go basically along different scales. But of course, I mean, the way that we are describing is assuming democratic governance. So, I mean, you can make your own interpretation of where that applies, essentially. And of course, it's quite, I mean, this sort of granular thinking about governance requires quite a lot of resources, I'm going to say. And that means basically it's really thinking about quite sophisticated governance ecosystems. I would say that it could really, I mean, well, we have the EU AI Act in place with its risk-based tiers, but it's not yet convincing for everyone that that's the right model. So what we are essentially saying is dimensional thinking, the way that we are describing it, could be the infrastructure to base those sort of risk tiers, for example, and it could give you more agile and more dynamic governance opportunity by then.
Thank you.
Time for one more question. Right behind you, Kat, at the back.
I'm still trying to work this question out in my head as well, but isn't trust a lot, though, based on the richness of the data sets that these things are trained on? So on things like where there is medical data or where there is stock market data of stuff, where there is massive data sets, we find these things are working incredibly successfully. But when there is a lack of data and then AI start feeding off themselves, they become more and more hallucinatory and they become wrong. I mean, an example, the only one I've got in my head at the moment is at the Paralympics, where they had the Honda-driven, AI-driven buses, and they'd never been trained on the way that disabled people move. And so on the first day, someone who was vision impaired was run over by an AI bus because it just didn't predict that they, even though they were facing it, they couldn't hear it because it was electric. They had no idea it was there until it hit them. So the limitation of data then erodes trust. Mm-hmm. Is that one of those things that's happening in other places? Which is why, is that where, when you were talking about that sort of cumulative effect of systems governing systems, mm-hmm. is that because data in the first place is the problem?
Well, of course, I mean, data is the biggest problem in AI, I would say, in the types of AI systems that we are talking. If data wasn't biased, if we didn't have those problems with the data, we wouldn't have any issues with AI. Well, we would have some issues with the way that people design it, but technologically, we wouldn't have issues, basically, in that sense. So yes, I think the solutions that we are trying to talk about when we talk about AI governance goes back to data, but the issue is the data problem is not solved easily as well. It's quite contextual, quite difficult to deal with, and it's always, well, because data is really incomplete representation of what you see in the real world, very biased representation in many cases. It's going to be, its destiny is to be basically faulty, I would say. I mean, we have to work on data side itself quite a lot, but again, the process, the learning process, and how AI behaves in various contexts, that's an area, again, to manage this issue as well. And the point is basically, I've given the ChatGPT example. It's already a part of our lives, and it depends on context. We need to adapt to different contextual situations because the context is represented in different ways. So it's the need for a continuous spectrum is partially due to that, actually, due to having very uncertain, very different contextual parameters in place. So I'm not sure, like, what is the exact question. I completely agree that the data is a huge issue.
To trust. Because if there's a lack of data and this then erodes, sort of capability of AI, mm-hmm. and we are seeing in places that AIs are now training AIs, you're getting feedback loop. I think some people just call it slop within it. That the things just start churning out. I think the illustration at the beginning was absolutely perfect because AIs don't do abstract thought, so that's just a derivative image based on all the illustrations it's seen that's been created by people. Mm-hmm. But then when you see things like, people being hit by, AI-driven cars because AI-driven cars didn't have enough data, that erodes trust in the concept of AIs themselves. And so therefore, that spectrum of governance becomes impacted.
Yes, of course. And that's also why we need a bit more like a spectrum thinking again as well. When things go wrong, we should be able to go back to a previous state and try to basically work from where we could trust more. And actually, the point of spectrum thinking and thinking about the different phases and where you are with the technology and the risks that are involved with the technology, that's really to guide those sort of situations, basically when to allow basically autonomous cars to be on streets where people might be affected. It's to capture essentially that sort of complexity in a way as well. I can't say that I have I have the solution, recipe for solution, but it's a hard problem, and I think dimensional thinking is sort of helping us to at least diagnose the problem a bit better to be able to go to solutions, essentially.
Okay, hugely complicated, for me at least in my tiny brain, subject matter, but beautifully explained by Dr. Zeynep Engin. Please give her a round of applause.